Floyd Mayweather Jr. is one of the greatest boxers of all time, but may have ruined the sport of boxing. Over the past few years, boxing has been declining due to problems such as boxers taking too long to fight each other, boxers trying to protect their undefeated records, boxers only fighting once or twice a year, and the rise in popularity of exhibition/influencer fights. One man is responsible for these problems, Floyd Mayweather Jr. Now, before any of you start attacking me, I am a fan of Mayweather's style. He's one of the greatest boxers of all time with the perfect blend of talent and hard work, but this doesn't change the fact that he's done a lot of damage to the sport. In this video, I'll be going over some of the problems boxing faces today and how Floyd is responsible for causing these problems. So one of the first major problems boxing faces today is boxers rarely fighting. On average, top boxers are only fighting once or twice a year. Now, this is partly due to the fact that they fight more frequently at the start of their careers because they take less damage. Top prospects are able to fight 3 or 4 times a year because they're only fighting journeymen, and these fights don't tend to go more than a few rounds with them not taking much damage. Because of this, they're able to fight with little recovery time. Title holders and world champions, on the other hand, are only fighting once or twice a year. The stakes are different for them because now they only fight top level fighters who are coming to do serious damage. This means that they need more time to recover, so they aren't able to fight as much. But even with these two reasons, during every other era of boxing, we had some of the greatest fights of all time, like Leonard Duran 1, 2 and 3. In every other era, boxers were constantly fighting each other like with the Four Kings, so surely there has to be another side to this. That other side is the marketing side. If a fighter was to constantly fight, it would saturate the market and should get lower views than if it was a special event. You can probably guess who started this. Floyd started his career like any other prospect, taking out as many journeymen as possible before winning his first world title. Things changed when he realized that he would benefit more from boxing by boxing less. Anytime Floyd had an event, more casual fans were watching because it was like a special occasion. It also helped that he had a great amount of time to recover in between these fights so he could come back in top condition. To be honest, I don't have a problem with this because it protected his health. There's been incredible stars like Muhammad Ali who are fighting constantly and making incredible amounts of money but walked away from boxing without their health. People don't understand how ridiculous Muhammad Ali's career was. He first won the title in '64, then proceeded to fight every 2 or 3 months with no breaks against Hall of Fame monsters. He fought Sonny Liston, Floyd Patterson, Henry Cooper and Cleveland Williams, just to name a few, all in the span of 1 year. The longest break he had was when he was forced to retire from boxing for 3 years because of his refusal to be drafted. His career would follow a similar trend after he came back, because within just 6 months of boxing again, he would go 15 rounds with Joe Frazier for the world title. There was no chance of being able to walk away from boxing safely whilst having a career like this, and Floyd understood this early on. His plan was to make as much as he could from boxing while still having most of his health at the end to enjoy it. The second point I'd like to talk about is undefeated records. You may have noticed that in boxing there's an endless amount of undefeated records, and I'm not talking about being 2-0 or 3-0. There's guys with 30-0 records that nobody's heard of. Boxers with big records that don't have a single title. A few decades ago, most active fighters had dozens of fights with a few losses. It was understood that every boxer will go through a loss at some point if they're aiming to conquer the world. Those losses would usually be against someone more experienced and would be an opportunity for them to improve. Fans would still stick around and would stay loyal to their fighters. It seemed like it would be impossible to stay undefeated in boxing, so it would be unfair for a fighter's stock to go down if they lost. Boxers would challenge themselves by going after the best fighters of their era, and it gave us some of the greatest fights of all time, like Ali Liston, Chavez Taylor, or my personal favourite, Leonard Hearns 1. Floyd Mayweather is responsible for this downfall of action in boxing. I'm not saying he came into boxing with the intention of doing this, but it's undeniable that his career has resulted in this. He started out his career by challenging anybody and everybody he could. Throughout his career, he racked up impressive wins against Hall of Famers and has an impressive 26 consecutive wins in world title fights. Floyd was an assassin capable of knocking anybody in his weight class out. However, he took a different approach when he realized that he was taking too much damage to his body in these hard fights. He realized that now that he was a world champion with a mainstream reputation, he could pick and choose his battles. He carefully picked out his opponents and prepared relentlessly to beat them. He would promote his fights by highlighting his undefeated record and building an opponent up as someone who could potentially take his O. He was also promoting his own fights, so he took a larger sum of the profits. This meant that he didn't need to fight as much and could get away with one event a year. This approach allowed him to stay undefeated whilst preserving his health, but it would change boxing forever. He became the face of boxing, and this caused the boxing community to believe that if a boxer wasn't undefeated like Floyd, they were bad. bad. These days, boxers avoid fighting each other because losing their undefeated records is like losing a tremendous amount of stock, but it doesn't need to stay this way. The solution is simple. We stop discrediting fighters for losing. We as a community need to start praising when these young prospects challenge each other rather than putting them down for losing. Times are changing because we've seen some incredible fights recently between prospects and young undefeated boxers, and hopefully boxing keeps heading into this direction again. One of the biggest reasons why people watch boxing is because they want to see two guys go to war with each other. They don't actually care about the skill level. They just want to see knockouts. I personally love seeing highly skilled, slick boxers, and this is why Floyd is one of my favorite fighters to watch. But the problem is he's just too good. He's so far above his competition in skill level that the fights just aren't close. When you watch a Mayweather fight, you're just going to see a masterclass. He's made Hall of Fame fighters look like amateurs. The problem is this isn't what the casual fans want to see. His style is too boring to keep casuals entertained. It wasn't always like this because, like I said earlier, Floyd's style changed over the course of his career from a vicious puncher to a defensive wizard. I would say this transition probably started around 2005 with one of his greatest knockouts against Arturo Gatti, where he put a vicious beating on him. But how does Floyd changing into a more defensive style affect the rest of the sport? At the time, Floyd was on the top of the world. He was the face of boxing and broke through into mainstream media. This meant that when people thought of boxing, they thought of Mayweather. This caused their views of his style to affect how they thought about the sport, causing the sport to become boring in the eyes of casual fans. This isn't much of a problem anymore because the Mayweather era is over and we're seeing a beautiful new era with all-action warriors such as Artur Beterbiev, Canelo Alvarez and Terence Crawford, just to name a few. The sport is looking brighter than ever with fans getting vicious knockouts in high-level fights. The next point I'd like to talk about is the power changing from promoters to boxers. For a long time now, promoters were the ones making the most money from boxing. They were seen as the organizers responsible for the events taking place and would naturally take a bigger cut. Promoters like Don King took this to the extreme by making a fortune from robbing their fighters with shady deals and contracts. This is why in 2006, Floyd would make the bold decision to buy out his contract from Top Rank for $750,000. He would then found Mayweather Promotions and started to promote his own fights. Thanks to this move, he could leverage himself in business deals and started making money for every ticket sold at one of his events, and would also get a cut of the pay-per-view money. Within just a year of doing this, he made $24 million in a fight against Oscar De La Hoya, and in 2017 he would go on to make $230 million against Conor McGregor. Other boxers like Canelo Alvarez realized how much power they had on the negotiating table, and this allowed them to create better deals for themselves to make their millions. In the UFC, champions are only making around $500,000 to $1 million, but the pay-per-view numbers for the events do just as well, if not better, than these boxing events where boxers are making millions. The reason for this is because in the UFC, the power is still in Dana White's hand, so the company is able to take a large cut of the profits, leaving the fighters with a fraction of what they deserve. Although this has allowed boxers to get paid properly, it's made negotiations for fights 100 times harder. Boxers now want to get paid as much as possible and won't agree to fight unless it's in their favor because this is the blueprint that Mayweather created. The last problem I'd like to talk about is exhibitions. Exhibitions have been in boxing since the sport first started. People always wanted to see their favorite fighters fight even if they are in retirement or past their best. A lot of the time, these exhibitions are just to answer what if questions like what if Muhammad Ali went up against a highly skilled Japanese wrestler called Antonio Inoki. And a lot of people end up watching these kinds of events because they end up being surprisingly entertaining, but now it's starting to get dangerous. We're starting to see the legends of our sport having to fight whilst in their old age when they should be taking care of themselves. In 2021, we saw Vitor Belfort get into the ring with a 60-year-old Evander Holyfield. I think Holyfield went in thinking it would be similar to a sparring session and he'd be able to get out with a good bag, but Vitor came in looking to kill him. It was clear from the first minute that Evander's legs were never there and Vitor was putting him down with heavy, vicious shots. In a few weeks, we should be seeing an almost 60-year-old Mike Tyson get in the ring with a roided up Jake Paul. As much as I love Mike Tyson, this fight should not be happening because it could end with Mike being hurt badly. But why would it be Mayweather's fault that these exhibitions are happening? It's because Floyd is the first person to have realized that he can make as much money doing exhibitions against low-level oppositions as long as he promotes the opponent as someone who's able to beat him. The problem is Floyd's opponents are carefully selected to make sure that he's never in any danger. This isn't the same for other retired fighters who are looking to do the same thing. They've set Mike Tyson up and his team should be ashamed of themselves for not protecting Mike from something like this. The only way we can stop exhibitions like like this from happening is by not giving it any attention. Don't give your money to these people and their businesses will fail. We've already seen it with boxing promotions that were doing this, like Triller. We should be investing our time and money into real boxing. Now, I want to stress one more time for the Floyd Mayweather fans that I love Floyd's style. I loved watching his fights and I think he's one of the greatest boxers of all time, but his career has done a lot of damage to the sport of boxing. The good news is we're heading back in the right direction and this year has been incredible for boxing. Let me know your thoughts on Floyd in the comments below.